welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. City Club is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and all of Oregon a better place to live, work, and play. I'm Greg McPherson, President-elect of City Club, and I would like to welcome the members and guests who have joined us here at the Sentinel Hotel, and those of you who are listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners makes it possible for us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine. Our Fall Friday Forum sponsors are AARP, Barron Liebman, Iberdrola Renewables, Perkins Coie, Portland General Electric, and Providence Health and Services. We are grateful for their support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in showing our appreciation for all these partners and sponsors. Next week, please join us when we welcome World Pulse, a Portland-based network of digital media connecting women worldwide to bring them a global voice. Jensine Larson, founder of World Pulse, will introduce us to 3 of the amazing women this organization has helped to harness digital communications technology to advocate, increase awareness, and build relationships with other women across the globe. You can learn more about this and other club events, purchase tickets, and become a City Club member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, City Club will be live tweeting at today's event. You can follow or mention us at PDX City Club, and be sure to follow the conversation by using the hashtag PDX City Club in your own tweets. Today's moderator, Carol Collymore, will facilitate a Q&A session with our panel, Ron Louie, Representative Jessica Vega-Peterson, and Reverend Lynn Smouse-Lopez. We will also hear from several other guests who are affected by the issue on today's program. Later on, the audience here at the Sentinel can ask questions. Anyone here can submit a question by writing it on one of the index cards on your table and holding it up for collection by a City Club staff member during the audience question period. City Club members have the privilege of asking a question from the microphone. And now our program for today. By a 95% vote, City Club members have urged approval of Measure 88, a referendum on legislation to issue driver cards without proof of legal presence in the U.S. City Club's research report on the measure concluded that driving privileges should be based on the ability to drive safely, know the rules of the road, and obtain auto insurance, not on immigration status. Editorial boards across the state also have endorsed the law, and if it passes, Oregon would join 10 other states, plus the District of Columbia, in offering driving privileges to undocumented residents. Today, some of those backing the measure, and some depending on it, will explore why its passage would affirm Oregon's core values, improve road safety, and help our economy. Moderating today's forum is Carol Collymore, who has worked in nonprofit development, politics, and government for over 13 years. She has worked with diverse organizations such as the American Heart Association, Pro-Choice Oregon, Raphael House, and Multnomah County. She is now the executive director of the Equity Foundation, a nonprofit that leverages resources to create social, economic, and political justice for the LGBTQ community. She sits on the boards of Morrison Family Services and Portland Playhouse and serves as co-chair of the dinner series at Our House of Portland. Please join me in welcoming moderator Carol Collymore and our panelists, who will be introduced by Carol.
Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. My name is Carol Collymore. Like Greg said, I'm the executive director of the Equity Foundation, and we strongly support driver's cards for undocumented residents. Undocumented residents are a significant part of our community and our economy and have been for a very long time. Everyone should have a safe way to drive to work, to school, to go shopping, to go to church, or frankly, wherever they need to go in a safe and legal manner. Allowing limited driver's cards for Oregon residents who meet the requirements will make our roads and communities safer. Driving privileges should be based on the ability to drive safely, the knowledge of the rules, and the ability to obtain auto insurance, not immigration status. But to speak on this better, I'd like to introduce some community members who will be directly impacted by Measure 88. First, Chad Vargas, manager of Adelsheim Vineyards. Can you please come up?
Hello, folks. My name is Chad Vargas. I'm a vineyard manager, been a vineyard manager for the last 8 years for Adelsheim Vineyard. And it's a little surreal for me to be up here today in a hotel in downtown Portland because we're in the middle of one of the biggest and earliest harvests that we've seen in Oregon. And for the last 14 days, I've been bringing in over about 800 tons of fruit. And I can assure you that even though I'm here this afternoon, there's still picking going on in my vineyards. I came right from the farm, and we started this morning at 6:30 with a full crew of about 50 laborers with buckets ready to pick today's scheduled fruit. And I can tell you that fruit is still being picked while I'm here because I'm not the person picking the fruit. It's those laborers that showed up with the buckets, and thank God for that because each one of those buckets brings in about 22 pounds of fruit. And we're picking somewhere near, if bringing in about 50 tons is almost 100,000 pounds. And the people that pick this crop for us don't just help me at harvest time, they help me throughout the season. At Adelsheim, I have a staff of only about 13 folks that come and join me every year. And we can get a lot of the beginning work done from pruning, pulling, and tying into our busiest time of year is where we start to do our canopy management. And I rely on contracted labor for that, and I will employ up to 30 people throughout the season to help us get to where we are today. So it's not hard for me to paint the picture for you that we rely on labor, and we rely on a steady supply of labor, and we need them to get to the job on time. And vehicles are the delivery mechanism for our workers. On my staff, I have 4 people that are the foremen that direct this work throughout the year and are directing harvest as I'm away, that drive company vehicles. And of those 4 people that I have driving vehicles, I know that most of them are undocumented. And I know that because they've come to me lately, just recently, to tell me that their driver's licenses are going to expire. We actually had one employee have a driver's license expire last year, and I can tell you that we do what we can to survive, and so we sent that individual to Washington. He had family in Washington, and he was able to get his driver's license in Washington because he was using a family address to show that he was, we had to mimic that he was a resident there. But these kind of business practices put us at odds with trying to operate in Oregon efficiently, abiding by the law, and I can tell you that we don't really, when we're put up against the wall on this type of thing, we don't have any other options for how we're going to operate because we rely on undocumented labor in our industry. We're a $2.7 billion industry. We're very proud of it, of the industry, because if you love Pinot Noir, you know that Oregon makes some of the world's finest. So what's going to happen with our Pinot Noir? Thank you. We're not going to lose this industry. We're going to fight from within to make sure we can continue to deliver the product that we do today. And we can't do that without our workers. I can guarantee you we cannot do it without our workers. And if you want to talk about mechanization, it's a long ways off. We don't even have our early adopters in mechanization yet. It's just starting to be talked about. We know it's something that we need to consider, but you are not going to do mechanization on the steep hillsides where some of our finest Pinot Noirs come from. We need our labor base. And so I'm here today to tell you that voting yes on Measure 88 is a vote for agriculture in general, but in particular, it's a vote to keep our industry healthy in Oregon and to continue to make those fine Pinot Noirs that are kicking butt against Oregon Pinot Noirs every year since we've been making them. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your support. And continue, I honestly want to thank you for the impact it's going to make not only on my business, on our industry, but on the families of those workers that work for me. We'll find a way to get them to work. We'll find a way to deal with whatever legislation passes. But what I want you to think about is when they go home to their families, how do they get their kids to school? How do they get to church? How do they get to the grocery store? They're going to continue to drive because they have to get those basic necessities done. But they're going to do so under a lot of stress that, they could be pulled over at any time. Not only that, they're put in a situation where they can't carry insurance for their automobiles. And so if they come into contact with one of your vehicles and you have an accident, which can happen anytime, any day, they're not going to be insured. And so it's going to cost us more money as taxpayers. So thank you for your support. Thank you for having me here today.
Next, I'd like to welcome Susanna.
Hello, everybody. My name is Susanna. I'm a wife and a mother of 3 children. And I'm here to give my testimony on how my life has changed ever since they removed the driver's license. On the year that they removed it, I was pregnant with my second child. And when he was born, a few months after, my license was expired, and I wasn't able to renew it. And my husband's license expired too. So we had to drive without a license. My son was born with asthma, and I remember that one day he got very sick at 11:30 at night, and I have to drive him to the emergency room. I was very worried for his life, but I was worried also because I, was risking that I might get stopped by the police, and I was very nervous. Now, 2 years after, I was able to apply, for the DACA, and I was able to get a driver's license. Now I have a driver's license and I'm driving, but it was a relief, but it wasn't complete because my husband, he's not able to get a license till now. And I have to do most of the driving. We had to move closer to his job because at that time we were living in Salem, and he was driving from Salem to Tiger every day. And it was 2 hours driving from home to his work and from work home. And now that we move closer to a job, I'm the one who's taking him to work. I have to take my kids to school, I have to pay bills, do all of the driving. And my son, who's now 5, the one that he was born that year, sometimes he asks, why doesn't daddy drive, Why do you all the drive? Is he a bad driver? Because he thinks that's why he doesn't drive online. And he doesn't really understand. Now, my older son, who's 9, he understands it and he tries to explain it to his brother, but they kind of worry too, because sometimes I can take him to work, he has to drive. And they're like, why isn't daddy home? Do you think he got stopped? Do you think he's gonna get home? And that makes me feel really bad. And I know many families are going through that too. And the Measure 88 would bring a relief not only for me, but also for other families that are going through this. They have kids that all we want to do is just drive safely to our jobs and to take our kids to their school. And I want to thank you, all of you, for being here and supporting this, because we're just here to make a better life. Thank you.
And finally, we have Anastasia.
My name is Anastasia Hernandez Vasquez, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about something that's close and dear to my heart. And I'm sorry, get a little bit emotional. I'm married to what I consider the world's best man. My husband came to this country when he was 15 in the trunk of a car underneath 7 other people to escape the abuse and the hardship that he was living in Mexico. He had a dream of having a family who had the opportunity to be American citizens, and he knew that if that's the only thing he could give our children, that would be enough for him to be proud of what he had done for them. We have been married going on 13 years. We have collectively 7 children. We're a blended family. Currently at home, we have 2 teenagers and 2 grade schoolers. One of the teenagers is his son, one is my daughter. All of them are our kids. We love them unconditionally and equal. 2 of our children are on the autism spectrum, and my husband works hard every day to be a father to them and a husband to me. But the one thing that we have had to raise our children knowing is that Daddy might not come home tonight. It's a hard thing to have your children panic at 5 o'clock. Daddy's not home. What happened? Is he coming home? Is he in jail? Check the website. Call him. He's not answering his phone. What's going to happen to us? We have had to raise our children. We have backpacks, which we call our bug-out bags. If my husband gets arrested and gets deported back to Mexico, we have to make the choice to either live without my husband, who is our main provider, or to go join him in Mexico. My daughter has her father that lives in the same town as us, and that would put a huge burden on her to have to choose which of the 2 dads she wanted to be with. She loves them both equally. And so, my children, I asked them to give me a few statements to share with you. And they said basically they want the security that all the other children have to know that their parents are going to come home at the end of the day and that their families are not going to be separated. So Measure 88 is a huge issue for us. And we are really pushing. It's not, people think it's an immigration thing. People think it's not. It's a family thing. We're families. We're families like everybody else. We're just a little bit different due to the fact that we can't get driver's licenses for some of our family members. My husband's been driving for the last 15 years. He has a good driving record. He passed his driving test 100% on the written, 100% on the driving. I can tell you, I'm a U.S. citizen, and I did not do that good on my driving test. So that's pretty impressive, and he follows the laws to a T. In fact, he tends to tell me, it says 25, not 26. You're going to get a ticket, slow down. But he's an honest person who has a wonderful family that loves him, and we just want him to have the opportunity to drive legal, so that is one less thing that we have to worry about. The immigration is totally apart from that, and we'll deal with that as it comes. Also, as far as insurance goes, I can tell you I work in the insurance industry, and it's affecting our insurance. There are certain companies that can insure people as long as one driver in the household has a driver's license, but the price that we pay for that insurance is astronomical. We went from paying under $100 a month to paying almost $400 a month for our car insurance. And for a family, that's $400. $300 of it could be going into college funds for our children or to better our lives. And so I really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you very much.
Okay, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of this with our distinguished panel. First off, Reverend Lynn Smouse Lopez is the pastor of Ainsworth United Church of Christ. She has been deeply involved in racial and gender justice work, the peace movement, ecumenical and interfaith ministries, for which she has written articles and has presented various workshops and panels. Next, we have Representative Jessica Vega Peterson, first Latina American elected to the Oregon House of Representatives. Yes, hoots for hoots, yes. And was the chief sponsor of the legislative bill that was referred to voters. Ron Louie is the former Hillsborough police chief and was one of the leaders in promoting the legislation in 2013 around driver's cards. So let's jump right in. Jessica, What made the need for driver's cards clear to you, and what made you take the lead on the original bill?
Okay, so thank you. Before I answer the question, I just wanted to thank City Club for the opportunity to have this forum to discuss this important measure for Oregon, and especially thank the members of the committee that reviewed the ballot measure and put together the report on it. It was excellent work. I was really glad to be a part of the group of people that were interviewed for it, so thank you for that. To give you a little bit of background about why we're talking about this measure today, in 2008, the Oregon legislature passed a bill that required additional identification and additional documentation when somebody wanted to get an Oregon driver's license. That bill was a move to bring Oregon in line with the Real ID Act that Congress passed. And that went forward, but ever since that time, even at that time, I think there was realization that this bill and this measure was going to produce hardship for a lot of people living in Oregon and have a big impact on the industries that are so important to Oregon, like the wine industry, like the nurseries, like restaurants, those kinds of industries. So in 2011, Governor Kitzhaber put together a work group of 17 people to talk about this issue and to see if we could come up with a solution that would work for Oregon and that was right for Oregon, that would ensure that people could drive safe and licensed on our roads. And I know that Ron was a member of that committee, and so he'll be able to talk to you about that some more. But as a result of the work that group did, I think that was, they worked together from like 9 to 12 months, there was a proposal brought forth to the Oregon legislature in 2013 that was Senate Bill 833. And that bill was a result of the work of this group. Again, many people from many different industries and parts of Oregon culture put that together. And so we moved forward with that bill in the legislature. And this was a bill, I was a chief sponsor on that bill, but we actually had 6 chief sponsors from both sides of the aisle. Democrats and Republicans were behind this bill. We moved forward with this bill, and it did pass both the House and the Senate with broad bipartisan support. To me, it just made sense that this was an issue that was having a deep impact on so many people living and working in Oregon. It was a step that we needed to take for the betterment of our state, to have a safer roads, and to make sure that everybody who is living in the state could drive licensed and insured.
So just to follow up to that, can you tell us how it ended up becoming a ballot measure?
Yes, so this was a ballot referendum. So once we passed a bill, so it passed out of the Senate, passed out of the House, and it was signed by the governor. And it should have become law on January 1st, 2014. However, before that could happen, there was a move to gather signatures to have a ballot referendum on that, which means that if they gathered enough signatures, that it would move forward to the ballot, and then in November, voters would have to support the work that we did in the legislature. So that's why with Measure 88, we're asking voters the same question that was asked of me as a state representative: do you support this? And so that's why it's appropriate to vote yes on that bill.
And Chief Louie, can I call you Chief Louie? Okay.
My wife doesn't, but okay.
What does the driver's card mean to the folks that are holding it? Does it have anything to do with their immigration status or anything related?
No, and I think there's really a misunderstanding because people are connecting that dot, and you shouldn't be connecting it. The driver's card, and that's what it's called, not a driver's license. In Oregon, if you have a driver's license, you can get on an airplane. You can go into a federal building. You can apply for benefits. The driver's card does not allow you to. You must pass all the requirements to get a card, has a license, but it, again, is for the privilege of driving and getting insurance. It is not an identification for some of these other things that a driver's license allows you to get. So they're 2 different things, and most people don't know that. They think somehow the driver's card is an anointment of legitimacy to apply and do lots of things. Again, you can't get in an airplane with it. You can't buy a gun with it. You can't get into a federal building with it. There's many things you cannot get with it. And the legislature did a very good job of identifying the card as distinct, as many other states have. other states have done the same thing, has from a driver's license. That's why it shouldn't be connected to immigration.
So can you tell me a little bit more, when you were chief in Hillsborough, were people arrested? Were there more hit and runs? Or people afraid of deportation? Like what were the incidences caused from unlicensed drivers?
And I could give you some examples. And let me start again with my background in public safety. Let me give you a scenario that happened in Hillsborough, happens in many other places. Now, and by the way, the Register of Guards says maybe 110,000 drivers in Oregon would be eligible for this. We're talking about a lot of people. So you're now, as of 2008, because of the Real ID Act, you can't get a license. So you're pulled over by a police officer. You don't have a license. We write you a citation. We take your car from you. Second time, you go to jail. Maybe there's a warrant for you. Third time, you get incarcerated. All because of driving. Okay, fast forward to today, when in Polk County, there's one deputy on duty in the entire county. You all know that, don't you? There's one deputy on duty. It's 1 in the morning. What do you want the deputy to do with 1, 2, and 3, I just told you? So from a public safety point of view, it's bad business to be involved in criminalized behavior because they're just driving. Even the my colleagues that have an immigration that fall on the different sides of the debate than I do even admit we're going to tell our deputies we can't do this. Now, again, the real examples are we're taking people away because the law provides that we have to do it. But again, if you're in Polk County and Klamath and a lot of these other areas, you're not going to be able to do it. It's not practical. That's what I'm trying to say. It is absolutely not practical. Plus, one more thing, Oregon law does not allow you to use any public resources for the sole enforcement of immigration law. You all know that. You can't use a cop to enforce immigration law. But this is now connected that way because they're undocumented, meaning we didn't know how they got in the country. You're now criminalizing that behavior. In law enforcement, we don't want that criminalized because we don't have the resources to deal with it from a practical matter. And I think a lot of that, what I just said, is not, people aren't really talking about that law enforcement perspective of it. And that's why you need to recognize that impact.
Well, and some folks are saying on the other side that it'll increase drug trafficking, or you'll be unable to stop drug cartels as they're running up and down Oregon. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I was in business 33 years, and my officers and I have arrested lots of people involved in drugs, and because they're undocumented, it had nothing to do with it. I mean, have I arrested more Americans than undocumented? Yeah, of course. People keep on connecting immigration and immigrants coming here to work and better their lives with the drug trafficking and the I-5 corridors and all that. And that's a specious argument, and it's a red herring, and I reject it completely.
Reverend Lopez, can you talk a little bit about how this issue might affect maybe your congregants or some of the issues that you work on and why it's important to you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I represent a church, Ainsworth United Church of Christ, who's part of the immigration justice movement. It's called Emerge now, Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice. And we have been supportive of immigration, justice for immigrants. And so this comes from very basic desire to respect and care for everybody. And as a Christian, we believe that the scriptures give us a background. The Hebrew scriptures tell us that we are to welcome the sojourner, to make a space for those who are coming to us, the strangers. In the Gospels, we are to care for one another. We are our brother and sister's keepers. So all those things for me personally and for us as a community of faith say that we need to support people, to help families stay together and not be separated, to help people find dignity and respect and be able to work and get to work. For us, it's a no-brainer. And I thank you both for the work you've done to get to this point. We would like to go back to driver's license fully, but that's not going to happen right now. But we see no other way. It's just who we are and how we are supposed to be welcoming to people.
Do you see in your experience, Anastasia was talking about the fear of dad's not, maybe won't come home. Have you experienced any division of family or that sort of fear that drives anybody around your work? Sorry, drives is a bad word to use, but who is engaging in this work because of that fear that, you know, you're going to come home and your husband or wife or mom or dad won't be there?
Yes, not in our congregation itself, but being involved, and we were the first church to declare ourselves part of the New Sanctuary Movement, Oregon New Sanctuary Movement. And there were folk in that movement, people that were picked up by ICE and from the Del Monte raids and so forth, that live with that fear every day because of their immigration status, but then you add on to it the licenses, and we've met many people, worked with people, supported people who this does affect. And it takes a toll on health, it takes a toll on mental health, as well as physical health.
And so, Jessica, or anyone who wants to answer, again, the opposition talks a lot about how this will increase illegal immigration or how it will depress our wages and, you know, the old trope, they'll take our jobs. Have you noticed any trends? Are there any studies that say this isn't true or this is sort of not realistic?
Sure. So, that, I mean, you do hear that, right? And I would say a couple things to that. First of all, when we were hearing testimony on Senate Bill 833, one of the things that was said is that and this was a couple years ago when the unemployment rate in Oregon was 8.4%, right? There were a lot of people looking for work. And even then, there was testimony given that in the places like the nursery field, you know, the wineries, those things, they were having a hard time filling the positions that they needed to get those jobs done. So the question that people are going to be taking jobs, these are jobs that are going empty without this labor force able to do them. The other piece is we've seen this in the other states, you know, in Washington State, for instance, we've seen that they have a driver's card, they have an option for people who don't have Social Security numbers or other documentation to get a driver's license or a driver's card, and there has not been an increase in the number of people applying for those licenses. So those arguments are not holding true at all.
And Chief Louie, you talked a little bit about rural Oregon, and I think us city folk, me specifically, forget that there's also issues around undocumented residents out there, and you hear through the news, you know, things aren't getting funded, the jails aren't being funded, police forces aren't being funded. How would this affect that?
Well, again, as I said, because right now the status quo is counter to public safety in Oregon. Understand that, because if it's defeated, things ain't going to get better. You're going to have 110,000 ex-drivers that are still going to be driving. Talking about the rural and the rural impacts, as I've already said, you have declining revenues, you have deputies being laid off and pulled away from the job. Again, Polk County is the most recent as of last month. And that is going to create a public safety hardship on the very limited resources that you have. So again, I want to reemphasize what I said earlier. By not passing 88, you're going to continue to criminalize driving behavior. Think about it. That's what you're going to do. And we in public safety, and now I'm retired, but I'm still engaged in it, we don't want our limited resources, whether it be in the metropolitan area or in the rural parts of Oregon, we don't want them to be engaged and involved in again, what this is going to create. And of course, the police in some of these areas, even in metropolitan area, if it's a busy night, we're going to choose not, we can't take this person, we can't deal with this person who's not driving or is undocumented and wasn't able to get a license. We're not going to deal with it because we can't, because our resources are too limited. I think we have to be practical about it. It's not an acquiescence to reality as much as an understanding that this is going to be a negative impact on public safety.
And so this one's for any of you. How do we answer the question that is asked by the other side about lawlessness, right? So this idea that folks have come here breaking the law. They're, come here, I hate using the word illegally, come here illegally, and then is this some sort of reward for breaking the law? And so what's a good answer for that?
First of all, I would imagine if I asked this room, how many of you have ever broken a law? Oh, I'm asking, how many of us have? Okay. Whether it's driving 26 in a 25-mile-per-hour zone or civil disobedience, of which I'm guilty, so forth and so on. So when somebody does something to break the law once, twice, 3 times, that doesn't identify them. That's not who they are. So somebody coming over the border without the proper papers, that doesn't make them a criminal or identify them totally. But yet we in this country insist on calling them, I don't, but others do, illegal immigrants, aliens, illegal aliens, and so forth. They're undocumented. They don't have papers. That doesn't really say who they are. So for me, that's the answer. Who doesn't break the law?
And can I add something? I mean, I think the other piece of this, and it was something that was alluded to earlier, but I think we all realize that this is a problem that needs a federal solution. And we've been all waiting a long time for Congress to do something about this. And every time it looks like we're going to have a path forward there, it seems like we take 2 steps back. So this is something, I mean, this bill and this measure that's before us, this is something that we are trying to find an Oregon solution that works for us to make our roads better, to work for the people who live here. And we're still waiting for Washington to do something. But I mean, I think it's up to us to really say, we're going to do what we can here in Oregon, but please do something in Washington so that we can have comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship. That's what we ultimately need.
So there's some concern that the states who have already done driver's cards or driver's licenses for undocumented residents, that it would undermine whatever the feds decide to do whenever they decide to do it. Is there any sort of answer for that, or if they decide to do some sort of overall sweep, would that undermine what we're trying to do here? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't think, I don't think it would. There's a lot of issues that we work in at the state level where the states are leading the way. I mean, this is just one of them because we can't wait for DC to solve the answers. I mean, we have to do things. And this is just, there's a number of, there's workers' rights issues, there's women's rights issues. So I just say that this is a place where the state has our power and our right to deal with this issue in our way.
Okay, so, and again, for any of you, the endorsement list for Measure 88 is incredibly long. I don't ever think I've seen an endorsement list this long. Can you talk a little bit about why do you think people have come together for this specific issue? Beyond, oh, our wine is delicious, or our plants are great. I think there's a heartier issue. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I believe that part of it is from the business perspective, the businesses that have seen the benefit and would help and secure their businesses by having people who have driving cards. They've come along and really supported it. The faith communities that support immigration justice have come along and supporting it. Others have supported it because it makes sense. It makes for safer roads, totally. So I think that I'm hoping and praying that the everyday person, whether they're or not they're in business or in a faith community that's involved with that or in law enforcement, I'm hoping they see that it does make for safer roads, that it's much better to have people licensed of some way or other with a driver's card than it is to have them not. And so I think that's brought people together.
And do any of you want to speak to the racial justice component of it?
Well, I think that this is a big piece of why this is important to Oregon and why an organization like City Club has come out so strongly in favor of it. when you were talking, it just reminded me of, we're seeing a broad coalition of folks supporting this, and I think one of those is like you look at an issue like choice, right? I mean, this is something that Oregon has been a leader on. We are the shining beacon right now in the United States in terms of reproductive choice issues. But as we evolve on that and take a look at reproductive health issues, and we understand that a woman's ability to get to the doctor safely, to be able to access her medical care, that's all wrapped up in it, and that's why I think that in terms of this measure of having these driver's cards, I mean, that's a piece of it, and people are recognizing that in the same way that in the whole conversation about racial equity and racial justice, that this is a piece of it. The immigration piece is a part of that, yes, but just having people who live here be able to access the roads legally is a part of making sure that everybody who lives in Oregon is treated the same under the laws in this way.
This is probably dangerous to say, but I really believe that the racial injustice and racism is behind a lot of this and behind the anti-immigration movement. I had moved here 18 and a half years ago, so I've been here long enough, but I moved from Southern California where we were dealing with a bill down there that was anti-immigrant. And here I find the same kind of prejudicial statements and media and advertising that focuses on the Southern immigrants coming over the border. They don't ever focus on the Canadians that are undocumented. And my church has undocumented Canadians, or had. I think a couple have died, but we've had people. But it's always been a focus to the South, and that has to do with racism. And all this is built up, and this anti-immigrant sentiment has to do with the fear that we white Americans are not going to be the majority anymore, and so we've got to barricade our borders, southern borders. And it really, as you can see, I'm very passionate and very angry about it because it's something that we've fought, and I've fought for racial justice for many, many years.
Yeah, you're welcome. So how are we on time? We're good? Okay. So something we haven't talked about yet is what is the repercussions of a no vote? What's the next step?
Well, again, I served on the committee over almost 2 years. And by the way, when we started this under Frank Garcia's leadership out of the governor's office, 3 states had driver card initiatives, Washington State, Utah, and New Mexico. Now I think we're at 12, including California recently. Again, as I stated, from the public safety point of view, a no vote continues with the status quo. And I have said the status quo of today is counter to public safety. So will there be other movement, or will we try to look to Washington? Because I'm sure the state legislature would say, well, I guess we're not going to go down that road again, another referendum, even though they courageously tried to do something. I applaud both sides of the aisle for that. I think if it fails, then we're going to have to look to the federal government to see what's going to happen. I don't know. All I can tell you is it's not good, and it's not good public policy to defeat it.
And I wouldn't like, say that we're not going to do anything. I think one of the things that I heard at the beginning of the summer, and I don't know if it's still true, was that Oregon right now is the only state in the nation that has an anti-immigrant measure on the ballot, which that's not something that we want to have happen here in Oregon. But it does change the tone, right? If this fails, if this measure fails, because we will have taken a step backwards in terms of racial justice and equity issues, and in terms of public safety. So I think that there will be work that still has to be done. There might be an approach that we can take, but I think it will turn into an issue like tuition equity, which took 10 years for us to pass tuition equity in the legislature, instead of something that we were able to get done in just one session, which is really a shame.
So it wouldn't go back up to the legislature for another, you wouldn't try to do it that way again? That's not an option?
I wouldn't rule this out. We're not talking about that right now. We're really focused on trying to get this measure passed, and then we'll see after the election, what happens and what our next steps are going to be.
And I want to jump in. The reason I said federal is the Deferred Action for Childhood program, the Deferred Action for Childhood program, which is from the federal government. We already have in America 300,000 applicants for this. Those are young people under the age of 16 that were brought into the United States without being documented as they cross the border. That's why there's no such thing as an illegal person. As a cop, I always say illegal immigrant. There's no illegal person. I've arrested bank robbers that are really bad for about 5 minutes. The rest of the time, they're okay. But you're trying to make them like they're illegal. And that's why I don't like it either as a cop. But here's the bottom line. In Oregon, you have hundreds of drivers who already federally have a driver's license, not a driver's card. Do you know that? And that's why I made a comment about the federal government. You already have that in Oregon, and you have 300,000, over 100,000 already approved in the United States that came in the United States under the age of 16 and are now qualified to get driver's license, social security cards, and workers permit. That's already occurring right now because of federal action. That's why I kind of lean in the federal
But
action.
they have to pay to apply to get those,
Pardon me?
correct? They have to pay to
Yes,
apply.
there is a cost.
And there's barriers to that as well. because
That's
it
correct. There's a
costs-
cost to that, but the point I want to make is that it is occurring, and we have Oregonians who are driving has a benefit of this program. Just like we wanted to get young Oregonians into school. I want them to go to school, I want them to go to college, and I want them to pay for my Social Security. It's a very practical matter here, folks.
Mine too, yeah. We got it. Okay. We are now going to open up to the Q&A portion of the program. If you have a written question on an index card, please hold it up high so that a City Club staff member can collect it from you. We will now take questions from the audience. As always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their question. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. Also, I will read at least one index card question.
I'm Edward Hershey. I'm a City Club member. First of all, thank you all for being here. I can't recall a more collectively credentialed or accomplished panel on a stage at the City Club Friday Forum. Representative Vega-Peterson, the fate of 88 may lie in the hands of people who will vote either with logic or emotion, who do not share your position or mine on immigration reform. A lot of them are probably listening right now across the state. What would you say to those people to convince them that whatever their position is on immigration reform, they ought to vote yes on 88?
So thank you for that question. So I would actually change it up just a little bit. I don't think that Measure 88 would fail because those people are going to vote no on it, because I don't know if there's anything to say to those people that would make them change their mind. But I think this measure will fail because the people who would support this if they knew about this aren't going to vote. The people who do have the same feelings that you and I do, that do know that this is an equity issue, that this is a safety issue, or would if they knew more about it, aren't going to vote. So I would encourage those people to vote all the way down the ballot, and for everyone listening here in the room today and on the radio who does support that, to talk to their friends, to talk to their neighbors, to talk to their coworkers about this, because that is what's going to make this be successful on the ballot, is getting the word out to making people understand why this is the right thing for Oregon and why it is so very important that people vote yes on Measure 88.
Hi, Sharon Robbins, City Club member. I wanted to just start by thanking the individuals who spoke at the beginning of the panel. It takes a lot of courage to come and talk to us, and I really wanted to say thank you to them. And then the other question I have, I served on the Ballot Measure Study Committee, and there's a lot of focus on the undocumented that are immigrants. But could you talk a little bit about the other individuals who are undocumented in our society who maybe we forget about, and the unintended consequence of denying all of them the opportunity to get a driver card?
Sure, I can speak to that. So thank you. So yeah, we did hear that, and when we were hearing testimony on Senate Bill 833, that is something that we talked about. We had testimony about how this bill will make it easier for veterans who don't have all the documentation that they need in order to get driver's licenses. We have people who were born with a midwife, let's say on a reservation, or just elderly people who don't have the documentation that they need in order to get a license under the bill that was passed in 2008. We have people who are transient and homeless populations that need a way to drive legally in the state that makes it really difficult for them to be able to get a driver's license as it stands today. So there's a lot of population in the state that this would be a solution to. You're right, not just an undocumented.
Thank you all for being here. My name's Mary Nolan, and I'm a member of the City Club. Something that I haven't heard except in the comments that Susanna made to me is I'd like you to address. Representative Vega-Peterson, you referred to the Real ID Act at the federal level that required Oregon, or the legislature at the time thought it required us to exclude people without documentation of legal presence from receiving a driver's license. But prior to that, Oregon had issued full driver's licenses to those people as long as they could prove that they could drive a car safely, they knew the rules of the road, and they could get insurance. So if we leave the status quo in place, it seems to me we will be, in a rare event, taking away a privilege from a group of people who previously had it. And I'd like each of you in some way to talk about what that does to the fabric of our community.
I could start with that, and you are correct. And we have lawyers in the room as well, because as I talk about this, we did take away a privilege. The federal government's reaction to terrorism, fears of identification, et cetera, did lead to the Real ID Act of 2008, and that did exclude. And to this day, we are excluding people that had a privilege prior, and could drive as a privilege prior to that. And so you are very correct, and that's why I say maintaining the status quo is poor public policy, as well as, again, what you could make the argument for. You've taken away something that somebody had, irrespective of how they got here. Yeah, you have done that. Interesting legal theory to all you lawyers looking for a job. Really, it is. It's a legitimate legal point.
I did mention that as much as I appreciate Measure 88, I wish we were going back, and I much prefer that full driver's licenses be issued like they were. For me, it's a question of respect and dignity and welcome. And if I can go back to what I know from my husband and his family growing up Latino in California, but it happened everywhere, and it happened with African Americans too. It's almost what we've done with having to try to push even this safe driver card is almost to me like we take away the welcome mat. You can come and you can work in my home, but you have to come in the back door. You're not allowed to come in the front. And that was a real practice, and probably still is in some places, for maids and domestic help and so forth, especially if they were not white. And so as a state, we've done that. You can come work hard, you can come and live, if you can make it through ICE and all that stuff, but you come in the back door and the welcome mat isn't there.
And I think you guys said wonderful things. I think the only thing that I would add to that is as a state, we rely on a workforce to make Oregon what it is. And if this doesn't pass, if we don't have an option of a driver's card for so many of the people who live and work in our state, we're denying the reality of what Oregon is, and part of the things that we love about it, like the wine industry and like all the agriculture that we love, and it's also making it a less equal and less welcoming state, and I don't think that's what we want Oregon to be.
Carol Witherell, City Club member, and you just said part of what my question was going to say. Thank you so much. I can't imagine how we can call ourselves a democratic nation or a democratic state and not, that is small d, to persuade everyone. I can't imagine us not extending the hospitality and welcome and appreciation and fairness and equity that is deserved by those who've been so disadvantaged by this lapsing of driver's licenses. I want to go back to the request that we do pay attention to those people who are planning to come out and vote against it, because I think that's crucial, as well as the other argument that you made, that we pay attention to those who might not show up, who will support it, who might support it. I would find this video of this panel amazingly persuasive to those who are not well informed about it and have a knee-jerk reaction against it. What else can each of you say would be your first line of attack and persuasion to address those individuals?
I would say don't let fear be the biggest guide in your decision about this ballot measure, because I think there's a lot of misinformation that's driven by fear out there, and I think it's more important about making connections with the people that affects. I'm a mom of 2 young children, and we're going to go get flu shots after I get done with this. That's not fun for anybody. I can't even imagine having the additional pressure of worrying about whether I was going to get pulled over because I didn't have a license. I mean, even though I'm living and working in Oregon. And so I think that just think about what this impact has on the people who live in your community, and don't let fear of something that somebody's saying about crime or that doesn't have a basis impact the decision there.
I'd say do what's morally correct and morally right.
Amen to both of you. I
like that.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Okay, we have one question from the floor, and I'm jealous I didn't write this question myself. For undocumented immigrants who fear deportation, how do we convince them to get driver's cards even if Measure 88 passes?
Again, I've spoken with many people that have that fear. Those that live in communities that feel safe and they trust their government and their police will be not as reluctant as those that live in fear in their communities. And understand, you've marginalized a population already, and the more you marginalize them, this is a public safety axiom. The more you marginalize the population, the more they're susceptible to corruption, being corrupted, to criminal acts, housing, employment. And the less marginalized and the more welcome they feel in their respective communities, the more they're going to come out of the shadow.
Yes, I think it's up to all of us and all the communities of faith and everyone who supports this to talk about it, to educate, and to be present and accompany people, because I think there are a lot of people that live in constant fear. So when one stands up and says, I will go with you and I'll be by your side, makes a big difference.
Very good. We have run out of broadcast time for the questions and have to stop for the day. And as we close, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to today's guests, Chad, Susanna, Anastasia, Carol Collymore, State Representative Jessica Vega Peterson, Chief Ron Louie, and Reverend Lynn Smouse Lopez. Thanks for listening.